This is a story about a man's last day on earth. He looked out at the little town he grew up in, on that first hot day of the year, the one that shouts, "Hey, summer's coming." Shame, really, that it would be the last day of his life. He sat on the grassy bank, smiling, remembering how when he was in primary school, he would walk up this hill, on the path to his right with his mum holding his hand. In the other hand would be a milk bar, that's a 10p ice cream. It always seemed to be hot on them days, in his memory. He would play this game in his mind, trying to match his steps with his mother's. And he remembered how his little sister's head would appear from the other side of his mother, smiling with ice cream all over her lips. It's funny, only now he could see how much his sister had loved him growing up. He smiled at that. He never showed her how much he actually loved her. But maybe it didn't need to be said. He was sure that today she would know that love had always been there. He began to think about the first time he'd fallen in love. That day, he discovered love at first sight was real. And he knew she had discovered the same thing, when after an hour of meeting him, she had jumped on his back shouting his name as he re-entered the college gates. A summer of emotion finally led to him being at her parents' house, in her bed, naked, with his back sweating from nerves and want. He wondered what she would be doing today. She had kids. Those poor kids. He hoped they'd all be together for it. He wished he could meet her one last time. That would have been nice. Wish her and her family the best. But no, that wouldn't work, would it? He would just have to say, "Thank you for gracing my life." It's a shame I've never had a proper fight in my life, he thought. Life should be about extremes. Then coming to a still content, knowing you'd tasted it all. There had been a few altercations. The biggest one when he was about 20. A friend said something to a guy who walked past. There was a group of them and a group of him. They had all been drunk after a night out, and one turned back. His friend did too. It led to a brawl, fists everywhere. But the issue was, he was drunk and could barely remember it. Bouncers had made them disperse. There was another time too, and again he was drunk and he could barely remember it. It had been a winter's night at a house party, and snow was on the ground. He would have been about 23. Him and two friends were stood outside in the cold, and a frightened girl had run into that house party for her life, saying her husband had beaten her. The people in the house locked it, giving her refuge that she needed, and the angry drunk husband arrived, leaving footprints in the snow to the door, footprints illuminated by the street lamp outside, and he had banged on that door and the window, demanding to be let in. He and his two friends saw exactly what was coming next, and they agreed, when he came up to them, they were just going to have to attack him, and they read it perfectly. He came up to them aggressively, demanding that one of them were going to let him in. He couldn't remember who struck first, but the guy couldn't handle three clenched fists colliding with his face as he fell into the snow. Maybe it was the alcohol, maybe it was the cold, but he didn't feel any of those punches. Our man, sitting on the grassy bank, I mean. The abusive husband grabbed his leg. His friend had kneed him in the head a few times. The grip waned and the police were there not after long. But no, not one fair fight. But maybe the karate contest counted. That was pretty close. 14 years old, the youngest there and the lowest belt, making it to the final round, against the oldest, who was a black belt. Yeah, that would do it. That was a real fight, a good one. And he lost it, after a kick to the head, when the black belt realised he was losing. He remembered being dazed, and looking at the judges who all looked at each other, not sure if that was legal or not in the junior contest. Well, it was given, and our guy sitting on the grassy bank in the sun lost the fight that day, but he won a lot of people over. Then he began to think about the other women he had loved in his life. There had been a few, and they were all good. He had always been the one to leave. Why was probably fear. Fear of them leaving him first, having to endure that pain. If you did the leaving, you were sort of in control, but that left him alone now. He should have gambled on one of those girls, he thought. Maybe, just maybe, they would have loved him for exactly who he was. Maybe he didn't need to be the thing he thought he needed to be, to have love, to have a real family. He looked up into the big blue sky. It was getting incredibly warm now. And as an urge to cry came, he smiled. Not today. Not today, he told himself. Today is a good day. You did good. It was a good life. One you should be proud of and eternally happy for. Most people don't get a life like I had, he said to himself. It was then he felt a hot tongue on the back of his neck. He laid back. A dog was playing with him. He scratched the back of his ears as he licked his face and laughed. Hello there. Separating him and the second son was the dog's face that smiled at him. Then he heard the owner's call behind him, and the dog ran off. He sat back up again and looked back, and there was a man, much like him, yet maybe 20 years older, in his 50s, sitting on the grassy bank, looking between the town and the sky, his dog sitting beside him, panting, smiling. They looked at each other, a small knowing smile shared between them. He went back to looking at the sky and the town, and remembered when him and his dad went fishing when he was about 14, how the family's trusty dog had been there, how they had given him the shade and water, and he had collapsed. Over a beer, them two had often retold that story, how they had almost killed the dog, with a smile. He was fine really, just not very good with the heat. He was great, he thought. He glanced at his watch. It wasn't going to be long now. He was calmer than he thought he would be, as he looked down at the grass between his legs and repeated one word in his mind, forcing a smile with, grateful, grateful, I lived. That's when a pat came on his back. I'm sorry, man. I thought I could do it alone, but I can't. You mind if we join you? He looked at the dog panting, smiling, then looked up at the man with the blue sky behind him. He really was like him, his eyes just more blue, not green. And sad. A beard, and just a few more wrinkles, and maybe thinner. Yeah, take a seat. This is really it. Thanks, son. Thanks. How long we got? About a minute? Maybe 2? I guess we've left it a little late for introductions. My name's Richard, but call me Rick. That's my dad's name. Nice to meet you, Rick. I'm Daniel. Rick didn't respond. He just sat next to Daniel, close, with the dog between them. And they all looked up together at the sky. The light, it was suddenly getting brighter. Apparently we're going to feel it before we hear it, Daniel. I don't want to die, Rick. No. Me neither, son, but we got to accept it. You seem like a good guy. I bet you did good, son. Daniel started to cry. Come on, suck it up, son. I'm sorry. Don't be. Look at it. As Daniel looked up, it was almost blinding. He could feel the heat now. It was burning the skin on his face. I think it's here. Be brave, Daniel. Be brave. Hey, hope you enjoyed that. If you like the channel, like and subscribe, and I'm going to enjoy my beer. But yeah, I enjoyed that, so hope you did.